because the meeting officially starts here. So at any time, if you have any questions, just ask. I'm going to mute everyone so that there isn't any background noise. You can ask the question either by unmuting yourself on the mic and speaking it out. Even during the presentation, don't wait for me to finish if you have a question, or you can type it in the chat window, in Zoom's chat window, or in the channel. So let's get started. As you probably know, Agora is a non-profit charity educational foundation. We insist a lot in the non-profit and educational parts. It is legally registered as a foundation in the European Union, which is the strictest form of non-profit. There are other non-profit forms like social companies, associations, and things like that, but foundations are the ones that are most controlled and supervised. So we were founded about 3 years and something ago, August 2016, and in 3 years we've expanded to cover more than 70 countries with about 130 already local clubs everywhere and about 1,500 members. And we are still progressing. I mean, there are a lot of ongoing campaigns, especially in Latin America and in African countries, that still haven't materialized in clubs, but they are in the works. We have about 30 clubs more in the works. So what do we do? Our main goal, as I mentioned, is educational, and we focus on training leaders, basically. Leadership skills are the core training that we do. And there are 3 supporting kinds of skills that we usually see them in that way, that are public speaking skills, critical thinking skills, and debating skills. We see them as accessories because in reality, we don't see public speaking as a goal in itself. I mean, unless you're a very, very specific kind of professional or you have a very, very specific purpose in life, usually people don't learn public speaking for the sake of just speaking in public. I mean, speaking to get paid. For sure, there are people that go into the professional public speaking circuit, but that's not our main goal. Our main goal is leadership, and our main goal is leadership through practice of those skills and of leadership skills themselves, and to have an effect on your local community, positive effects, hopefully. I do want to mention in the general trainings, we do go in depth about each of those skills. Here, I will just mention a couple of things that I think are important to emphasize. First of all, about public speaking. Usually people think that...
So, Alex, yeah. Hi, sorry for interruption. I have a question here. So, if public speaking is my main goal,
okay,
so this club doesn't fit me, or it will do this for me.
Say again, sorry.
So if public speaking is my main goal, okay, because yes, I'm doing this in my career as professional thing that we just. Yep. So does this club fits me or not?
Yeah, because a lot of the activities concern public speaking, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Without any doubt.
Here, thank you.
In fact, when you start the club, you will be doing mostly public speaking projects because those are the easiest to do and the ones that don't require too much preparation and the ones that are like fully explained. Debating and critical thinking are a bit more difficult, and leadership is even more difficult because those are practical projects that you need to do outside of Agora, not within the club. So regarding public speaking, usually people think that public speaking is a skill that you only develop for talking in front of an audience. That's far from true, although it has that name and of course it serves that purpose. But at the end of the day, you will notice that as you progress along the public speaking educational path, your general communication ability will increase. You will be able to be more articulate, you will be able to be more focused, you will be able to transmit more clearly your message, to structure your thoughts, and that will impact your overall communication with everyone, even in small groups or in one-to-one interactions, whether it's, I don't know, a job interview with your boss, whether you're pitching a project to a venture capitalist. It, in general, improves your communication skills. And the improvement actually is quite dramatic, and is seen rather quickly. So you don't need to be spending like years training, but just, I don't know, 4 or 5 months in a club is usually good enough to see a very important improvement. For critical thinking, our main goal is giving people the tools so that they can discern when they are being manipulated, when the information that they are being fed is not accurate or has some traits that are fallacious or that is not logically consistent. And we do train there in things like not only logical fallacies, which is the minimum thing to detect inconsistency in arguments, but also things like psychological biases, cognitive limitations that we humans have, because if you're aware of those, you're a little less prone to suffer them. I wouldn't say that you are vaccinated completely, because even people that know those cognitive biases that we have, they still fall for them. It's our nature. But at least you're a bit more prepared to examine things subjectively, which is a fundamental skill for leaders, of course. And in debating, we have a debating system that encourages more than two viewpoints on a single issue, because usually debating clubs out there they all inherit from what is called the British parliamentary debating tradition. And actually, there is a style that is called like that, British parliamentary debate. And when there is a government, there is an opposition, they alternate turns, and in each turn, each of them has specific limitations on what arguments can be introduced, what can be refuted. We have a much more freestyle debate. We allow more than two teams per issue, so that it's not like the only options being for and against something. There can be more nuances. And our rules system encourage seeking consensus, not on the main issues, because obviously teams are not going to give up their core positions, but maybe finding compromises on some particular issues. You can see it as some sort of negotiation. And as far as I know, that's unique in our debating system. No one else in the world has it. And it originated from a research that showed that traditional debating systems, traditional debating rules, although they are very positive for developing some very important skills, including critical thinking and argumentation and things like that, but they encourage what's called a dichotomical view of the world, like black and white, no nuances, for, against, yes or no. And they also polarized. And right now, what we need in the world is exactly the opposite of polar viewpoints. So that's rather unique in us, and it also contributes to leadership, because obviously a leader has to be able to argument his viewpoints and push for them. Now, how does the Agora system work? First of all, as you have probably seen in the presentation, Agora clubs are not classes or classrooms. There are no teachers there. There are no lessons as such. Nobody is going to come there and teach a lesson on how to do that. We use what is called the club practice approach. And I usually make an analogy here with a cooking club. Imagine that you want to learn how to cook, how to be a good cook. Now, you have two options. You can go to a training seminar or to some classes, maybe by someone that is very famous and very expensive. I don't know, Gordon Ramsay. I don't know who you have in Kuwait. Here in Spain, we have like Ferran Adrià, people like that. And you learn from him for a week. You spend a lot of money, and that's it. And hopefully, you've learned something. The other approach is the approach that we take, and it is, instead of that, you sign up to a cooking club that, apart from that, happens to be free. So each week, you study the educational materials that we provide, and each week you cook a dish for your fellow members. And all the members are going to try that dish and give you their feedback and their opinion and their suggestions. And you repeat this process week after week after week for several months. So research shows that, and when I say research shows, you'll see that in Agora we are, and that's in our bylaws, by the way, we are very science-based, science and research-based, and not the kind of research, not the kind of science quotes that is published in popular psychology journals or in business reviews that, well, in IBM this worked, therefore it must work for everyone. And no, we actually are research-based in the sense of research that is actually published in scientific peer-reviewed journals, controlled studies, not just anecdotal evidence, which is the same as no evidence. So research shows that people that consistently practice, that apply their skills constantly, and that constantly try to learn something from what they developed and improve and persist, they end up being much more skilled in whatever they're learning than people who just attend classes. Whether that is practicing the piano, playing tennis, public speaking, whatever. This is not, sometimes it's even for hard science skills like math exercises or mathematics. Yeah, you can go to a course in math, you can go to the university, but unless you do lots and lots and lots of exercises, you still have a bad skills in math. Same here. It is much more effective to be in a club, to be consistently and constantly practicing using a structured program, not without any purpose. If you just practice without any purpose and without any goal, you won't get anywhere. There has to be a path. That will get you to be a better cook or a better public speaker much faster, or a better leader than any other approach. In fact, if any of you is from the software or IT community, you'll recognize this as some kind of agile process, if you want, in which there are no like grand designs in the beginning, but you start practicing and you improve. Now, one of the things that also shows up here as a question is, okay, how can people provide evaluations? So how can people provide feedback? Because in a club, members are not usually more experienced than others. So, there may be the occasional person that is like super experienced, 30 years in communication, TV, and media, but even they. So how can a member provide an evaluation of someone that is more veteran or more advanced? And I always say the same thing. You're not providing an academic evaluation. Imagine that you go to a movie. You watch the movie, you go out, and you don't have an opinion on what you just saw. You can tell your friends, I don't know, I didn't like the acting, it was too artificial, or the story was cliche, or the story was so original, I didn't expect that twist at the end, or it was very slow, it was too long, the effects were terrible, the effects were great. And you don't have an opinion on all of that, despite the fact that you are neither a director, you're neither a professional actor, you're neither a movie producer, but you don't have an opinion. If you go to a restaurant, same thing. Despite the fact that you're not a professional chef, you don't have an opinion on the service, on the food, on the prices, on the environment, on how the restaurant is set up, everything. So here it's the same. At the end of the day, for public speaking, you have like customers, and that's your audience. And you're talking to them. You're not talking to someone that is writing an academic book on public speaking and you have to satisfy him. No, you have to satisfy your audience. So people that are your fellow members that are going to provide you with their feedback and their evaluation, that is simply their opinion as people that receive what you just gave them. In this case, a speech. That should be considered not like a judgment or an exam, like, okay, you got a score of 6, so you fail or you pass or whatever. It's just an opinion. Every evaluator just provides his opinion, nothing more, nothing less. And it's up to the speaker. I'm talking about speakers, although every kind of project is evaluated, not only public speeches. So many times, even in a meeting, you get contradictory evaluations. Someone will tell you, you spoke too fast, I couldn't get anything. Or someone will tell you, I think you spoke too slow, so maybe you should accelerate a bit. That's a bit up to you, to whether to pay attention to the feedback you receive or not. Well, obviously, you should pay a bit of attention, because that's the whole point. If you go to a meeting and think that you already know everything, then there's actually no point in going to an Agora club at all. So Agora has several core principles, and some of them we expect to be upheld by members as well. The first principle that is only for
Alex.
Yeah.
Sorry for interruption. So you just mentioned that the evaluation in the club will be based on the opinion of the attendees.
Yeah.
This is right?
Yeah, that's right.
So is it the best way to have evaluation, or we have another way for evaluations?
I'm not sure I got the last words that you used, but basically for each project you have an appointed evaluator at the meeting, and he will give a special evaluation. We'll talk about that a bit later. That is directed by the educational program, and then everyone else will give you a bit of more generic evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
So the first and one, I would say, most important principle of Agora and its clubs is neutrality. Neither Agora, the foundation, nor clubs can promote or endorse any particular moral viewpoint, any particular religion, any particular value system, any particular ideology or political party or third-party organization or product or service or things like that. Meaning that we are neutral. We don't have an agenda. We don't come here to, I don't know, do changes in the way people think or live. So the club as a whole cannot have an opinion on anything, basically. The club, even if all the members of the club unanimously agree that this is a worthy cause, whatever, and we should put forward a message or a publication saying that we endorse it, that's not allowed. Because Agora is not only one club, Agora is many clubs, and because of one thing that one club does in one place, members in other countries that don't look so well on that particular issue may have problems. Now, this applies only to clubs and the foundation itself. Members, individual members, they of course are encouraged to have very strong opinions on whatever they want. They are encouraged to speak about them. They're encouraged to give speeches, to execute leadership projects. I don't know, if your leadership project is about helping a local mosque, then by all means do it, or a local church. If you want to speak about religion, by all means do it, or about politics. That's a bit up to each individual member. And in fact, we encourage people to have strong opinions and to defend them on controversial issues without being so much afraid of offending someone, because at the end of the day, speaking about anything that matters in the world will probably offend someone in some corner of the world. Now, having said that, the club as a whole can decide, you members can decide that you are not going to have speeches about politics. That's fine. If you want to introduce that kind of limitations for the sake of, I don't know, having a nice environment and all that, I don't recommend it personally, but that's your call. Then that's fine. But what you cannot do is only limiting one kind of speech, one side of the, let's say, equation. It's okay to say we're not going to talk about politics. It's okay to say we're not going to talk about the government, but it's not okay to say we're not going to criticize the government, because in effect, you're censoring. You're saying only one half of the thing is not allowed. The other, praising the government, is okay. So that's something that you would have to decide. Now, another core principle that we expect everyone to have is tolerance. Tolerance meaning that you have to be able to listen to other people's opinions, no matter how offensive they may seem to you, no matter how disgusting or how deeply you disagree with them. You should be able to listen to them and not react like emotionally or start shouting or agitating or stand up and leave the club, or much less violently. Because at the end of the day, the way to, let's say, for those opinions that are super negative or super controversial, the best way to address them is through another speech or through a debate. In general, through calm refutation. Because if you react emotionally, or if you just leave and slam the door and say you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, how you dare, then this just makes the other person stronger and gives more support to his ideas. There's only one kind of speech that we don't tolerate in clubs, and that's hate speech. In general, that's a rule, meaning that no one can come and encourage violence or hate against a group of people, regardless of who that group of people is. Another rule for clubs and for Agora in general is that they cannot discriminate, meaning that you cannot discriminate based on gender, you cannot discriminate based on social economic status or on race, ethnicity, age, you name it. There is only one limitation that is, or sort of discrimination that is more or less allowed implicitly, and that is if you have a club that works in English, clubs can work in any language. It's just a matter of what members want. Agora is not about English. Agora is about other skills. But we don't have the educational materials in every single language in the world. So basically, the number of languages that we can operate in is a bit limited right now. I think it's 5 or 6. We're working on that, though. But in any case, you can decide to have a club that operates in Arabic or in French or in German or in whatever. In Portugal, clubs operate in Portuguese. In Spain, they operate in Spanish, most of them. And obviously, if someone wants to join a Spanish club, then they do need to know the language. That's like obvious. So the club can discriminate in that sense. I mean, if you don't know Spanish or if you don't know English, then I'm sorry, you cannot be a member of this club. It's just not going to be useful for you. Although people can improve their level of a foreign language in Agora clubs, and we have specific activities for language improvement, Agora clubs are not a place to learn English. It's not the best place. I mean, you would be better off investing your time in an English language center than in an Agora club. It's more effective. And then you can come to an Agora club and like talk in a way more sophisticated way than anything they will teach in a language center. Another thing is that both the foundation and the clubs are non-profit. I think that's super easy. It doesn't need too much discussion. And another principle is that what we call intellectual honesty. Support for science and the scientific method is at the core of our bylaws and encouragement of science and technological progress. So we expect people to have an open mind. Intellectual honesty is about having an open mind, being able to examine critically not only the ideas of other people, but also your own ideas and beliefs, and being able to, that's difficult, by the way, I must warn you, it takes a lot of learning and practice, and being able to recognize that you were wrong about something if the evidence against it is sufficient or significant. And that's actually a very important leadership skill, because leaders that dissociate themselves from their opinions, because many times the problem that people have is that they put an equal sign between them as a personality and their opinions. So if someone attacks their opinion, they feel that as a personal attack, and they never allow themselves to be proven wrong, because for them that is like, oh, my personality is a disaster. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, again, research shows that people that are able to recognize that they were wrong about something and change course and adapt to circumstances and to new evidence, they are much more valued as leaders because they are much more honest, in fact, and they are much more effective as leaders, because obviously at the end reality will win regardless of what you think about it. So it's better that you admit it and change course rather than trying to hit the rock in front of you just for keeping your own opinion. Now, having said that, we have some other what we call the operational requirements in terms of there are many activities that can happen in a club. You can't have all the activities in a single meeting, and that's why we have those operational requirements, so that, for example, debates. A debate is something that in a club will take usually an hour or an hour and a half, even. So that's basically the whole meeting. Obviously, you can't have debates every single meeting, but it's also bad if you don't have debates at all. So, for example, there's a requirement to have at least 4 debates a year, so that part is not like left completely without any support. But for new clubs, you shouldn't be concerned, like yours, you shouldn't be concerned about these operational requirements. These are only for stable clubs that fully understand the Agora system, that know all the activities. And we'll have an online system soon to track all that. So I just want to mention that there are such requirements. But for now, for starting the club, it's not really important. Now, what happens in club meetings? First of all, meetings have a structure. All meetings have a structure, meaning that you don't just meet and improvise. Okay, what are we gonna do now that we are here? No, meetings have to be planned. Not a lot, but at least a minimum amount of planning must go into preparing a meeting. That creates an agenda, and the agenda, as you can see, this is an example. It's just a template. You can use any template. Indicates what sections are going to be in the meeting, who is responsible for each section, a brief description maybe of the section, and that's important, the duration of that particular section. Everything is timed. All the sections are timed in an Agora meeting, so that first of all, the meeting doesn't go over time. Second, because, and that's super important in real life, speakers need to develop an inner clock, because in real life you don't have like an unlimited amount of time to speak. You have a very specific amount allotted, and that's it. And if you exceed that time, bad things happen. If you're at a keynote speakers conference, if you're giving a keynote speech at a conference, or if you're in a business meeting, probably the worst that will happen is that people will look very bad at you, and probably they won't invite you to come again to their conference. But if you're talking to the media, or if you're talking to in some other contexts, people will just cut your mic, and that's it. If you managed to say what you wanted, fine. No, bad luck. So you need to be aware. You need to develop an inner sense of time, so that you are able to transmit your message succinctly, concisely, within exactly the allotted amount of time, hopefully less. So usually this allows meetings to run between 1 and 2 hours. And well, that's a bit up to you, how many sections you want to include in a meeting. We don't recommend more than 2.5 hours, because people become very tired. After all, a meeting is an educational activity. It's not like socializing. For sure, after you finish the meeting or before the meeting, you can have a social section. Many clubs in Spain, for example, they on purpose choose to meet in restaurants or bars, so that they can stay after the meeting and socialize. And some clubs in Indonesia, they first have dinner and then they have the meeting. Well, that's fine, as long as you know when one ends and when the other starts. Now, meetings are divided into sections, as I mentioned before. There are many kinds of sections that you can have in a meeting, and each section has a person that is responsible for that section. So there is a meeting leader, whose goal is basically to ensure that the meeting flows smoothly. And then for each section, for example, prepared speech, well, there is one person giving the prepared speech. For the hot questions or improvisational speaking section, there's one person that coordinates that section, that calls for volunteers to answer random questions, and so on and so forth. And we have some roles that are transversal, that span all the sections. We have about 5 of them, although for a start, with those 2, you are good to go. And those 2 are the timer. There has to be someone that times every single section. And by the way, the timer has the power to kick the speaker out of the stage. It is described in the documentation how to do that, if the speaker exceeds his time, like, by a lot. And the grammarian. The goal of the grammarian is basically monitoring the language and providing what we call the word of the day, or the idiom of the day, or the phrase of the day, or the idea of the day. And that has one very particular purpose. First of all, the goal of that thing is for speakers to try to use it during their speeches. With what purpose? Because to be a good public speaker, you need to be able to talk naturally. There is nothing more valued in public speaking than being natural. That is like a cornerstone of your credibility and your authority as a speaker. Being yourself, having your own style, not being fake, not trying to pretend someone else to be someone else you're not. Anything that hurts that naturalness, anything, even if it's just perceived, it's super detrimental to your credibility as a speaker. And the problem is that unless you're super experienced, if you try to memorize a speech, you'll probably sound very artificial. It takes a huge amount of effort, a really huge amount of effort and practice to be able to speak from memory. I mean, not even actors in theaters do that. It takes a huge amount of effort to like fully memorize something and transmit it naturally. So we don't encourage that approach. And the goal of the word of the day is trying to kick people out of that habit and make them improvise and on the fly add things to their speech, because the word of the day is not known until the very moment of the beginning of the meeting. So one can have a prepared speech and now he has to somehow add that word into his speech on the fly. Now, the important part, or well, everything is important, but one of the most important parts is the evaluation. Every section has an evaluator, and all the roles, by the way, that I'm mentioning are changed from meeting to meeting. So, for example, the meeting leader is not the same in every single meeting, and the timer is not the same person every single meeting. Otherwise, poor guy. How you assign roles, that's up to your club. Usually it's volunteer, like after a meeting, you ask for who wants to be the timer next meeting, who wants to be grammarian, who wants to give a speech, who wants to be the meeting leader, who wants to be the meeting evaluator, things like that. But you can organize any other system. And the goal of the evaluators, as I mentioned, is providing feedback for improvement to the people that participated. Evaluations are a complex topic. In fact, we're going to have a scheduled training just on evaluations because it's difficult to give good evaluations. And an evaluator has several roles, in fact. One of them is motivating the speaker so that you cannot go and say, wow, your speech was terrible. I didn't like it at all. Because, well, you're going to depress the speaker and he's probably not going to come back to the club. And it's also bad because you're not saying what, it's generic. It's just, I didn't like your speech, but you're not being specific about what exactly you didn't like. You didn't like how I presented it. You didn't like the speed. You didn't like how I moved on the stage. You didn't like the language I used. One thing, by the way, about evaluations is that they never, except for some very specific projects, they never go into the content of the speech. So an evaluator will never say, I disagree with you, with what you said. That's not the goal of the evaluator. Because when an evaluation is not a debate on the content. You can have a debate if you want, but that's different activity. An evaluator cannot say, I disagree, you're wrong, or things like that. No, an evaluation should focus on the delivery. And that's actually a bit difficult if the evaluator disagrees strongly with what you said. He still has to learn to keep quiet about the content and focus on the delivery and help you improve. And I must say that it's, just a second, I must say that it's equally bad to say, I didn't like your speech at all, than to only say, I loved your speech. Because again, you're not being specific. And second, if everything the speaker did was so perfect, then what's the point of coming to an Agora Club? Yeah. Mohamed.
Thank you, Alex. So, Alex, regarding the content, is the content will be every member will choose his content?
Yes.
Or there is
no, every member chooses their own content.
Okay, perfect. Thank
you. Although, that sometimes happens, clubs, that's a bit up to the vice president of education of the club. You will see there is such an officer that you have to elect. They can decide to have themed meetings. Okay, so let's have a meeting on the topic of travel, or let's have a meeting on the topic of whatever. That's fine, as long as it's not like every single meeting. I mean, people do have to have the freedom of choosing their content. And we don't limit the kind of content. Again, if you need to practice a speech for selling a product, that's fine. I mean, it's perfectly legitimate to try to present your product in front of the club, as long as you don't do it like every single speech. That's something different. So evaluations, one thing that they also need to share, and I'll mention it here, and although we'll develop that further in the training session about evaluations, is that they have to be actionable. They have to be specific and they have to be actionable. Actionable meaning that you can't just say, I didn't like the language you used in your speech. You have to offer suggestions for improvement. And those suggestions must be practical, must be something that the speaker is able to do. You cannot just say, for example, I think your voice is too coarse. Well, excuse me, that's my voice. I cannot do anything about it. Well, maybe I could be, I don't know, starting my day every day eating raw eggs. But no, I mean, they need to be something that the speaker can address. Otherwise, it's pointless. Now, specifically about evaluations, and that's something that Mohamed asked me before, there are two kinds of evaluators. First, for every project and every meeting, you have an evaluator for your particular activity. Again, he or she will change from meeting to meeting. It's not like you have the same evaluator all over the place all the time. You can have a mentor, but that's a different thing. And the evaluator always uses evaluation cards that are tailored to your specific project. So, for example, if you're giving speeches, if your project is about public speaking, and if your specific goal is body language, for example, or speech structure, then in the educational materials, there will be a specific evaluation card that will guide the evaluator as to what he needs to focus during the evaluation. So if it's body language, for example, then he'll need to focus on how you look at the audience, how you move on the stage, how you, what gestures you use, whether they are synchronized with what you're speaking, whether they are transmitting the same message or they're contradicting it, and things like that. And that evaluation is given both in written form to the speaker or to the participant, meaning that he fills that card and gives it to you, and both verbally in front of the club. This is like an evaluation activity. Takes about 3 minutes, that the evaluator presents a short evaluation on your performance. Again, remember, this is just an opinion. It's not a judgment on how well you did. And now there is a generic evaluation that is given written only by the rest of the members and guests in the club. And for that, we have some templates that you can use, or you can design your own. That's a bit up to each club. Now, what kind of activities we have? We have a huge number of activities that you can have in your club. Each of them has a specific purpose. Some are designed to improve your public speaking skills. Some are designed to improve your leadership skills, your critical thinking skills, and your debate and argumentation skills. It's absolutely impossible to have all the sections in a single meeting. As I mentioned, just the debate section is like one hour, 1.5 hours. And then if you keep adding things, you'll end up with a meeting that's probably 10 hours. And we keep adding activities all the time. We, in fact, encourage clubs to experiment, to design their own activities, to see if they work, as long as they are educational. I mean, remember, that's the purpose of the clubs, more than socializing. And if they have new ideas and interesting things that they have seen that work, then by all means, share them with us. And we'd like to make them available for everyone else and standardize them. In fact, since the beginning of the year, we have added like 4 different activities proposed by members that have tried them out in other associations, in other organizations, some of them related to public speaking, some of them related to leadership, and they work rather well. So there's absolutely zero problem with that. Now, usually a typical meeting will go on like this. This is just a suggestion. I do recommend that you start with this, and then you can tweak it and experiment on the fly as you need. So, for example, the meeting leader will introduce the meeting. This includes introducing the guests, talking a bit about what the club is, what the purpose of the club is, talking a bit about Agora Speakers International, how we fit into that. Some more operational things like, please everyone turn off your mobiles, don't talk while a speaker is talking, don't leave the room, or don't make many noises. Of course, a meeting leader has to be able to adapt. We'll have a special tutorial on that because apparently there is a poll in the international group and a lot of people are asking about how to be a good meeting leader. But the meeting leader has to be able to improvise, meaning that if at a particular meeting there are no guests and no new members, then it's pointless to be explaining again what the club is about. So you skip that part. But you need to be able to improvise because you don't know until the moment the meeting starts, you don't know whether there are going to be guests or not, usually. So then the meeting leader will introduce the timer. The timer will talk a bit about his role. All speaking takes place in front of the audience. So no one speaks from his chair or his place, because the point is not giving a toast at the table from your seat, but going in front of an audience. And then usually the meeting leader will introduce the grammarian. The grammarian will talk about his role. And then usually for each section, you will have a cycle that is repeated. Second. As a section that is repeated, in which the meeting leader will first introduce the evaluator of the section so that people can know what they should be focusing on. So for example, if someone is doing a project on vocal variety, the evaluator will come up front and say, so today, John is doing a project from the public speaking path. It's about vocal variety, so we need to focus on how he uses his speech, how he uses the pitch, how he uses the pacing, how he uses different tonalities, how he uses pauses, so that the audience can know what to look for. And then the section leader or the speaker, in this case, will take over. He will do his thing. And finally, a section of the evaluator will provide his feedback after a short break of maybe 1-2 minutes, so that he can write things down and organize his thoughts. And usually, well, this is repeated for each section. And at the end, we'll have the conclusion of the meeting, in which things go in the opposite order, usually. The grammarian will provide a report, the timer will provide his report, and then we'll have a meeting evaluator that provides general, let's say, opinion on the whole meeting, whether it started on time, whether the venue was okay, whether there was too much noise, general suggestions for improvement. The meeting leader also evaluates the evaluators, whether they provided useful evaluation, whether it was actionable, and things like that. Now, most of the activities, like icebreakers, thought of the day, debates, they are self-contained, meaning that they are every time the same. So if you do the thought of the day or the idea of the day or the book of the day, you can do it 20 times in a row. It will always be the same kind of activity. But prepared speeches are different, and a leadership as well, because prepared speeches, they do follow what we call an educational path. Everyone starts with the basic educational path that has 16 projects, and each of those projects, well, most of those projects are divided into two. One part of the project, and they have to be done in different meetings. One part of the project is what we call speech analysis. You have to find a speech that you like. It can be from anyone. You just need to like it. It can be from a politician, it can be from an actor, it can be from, I don't know, a commencement speech at a university, it can be a graduation speech, whatever. You can find it on YouTube, from TEDx, from political debates. It doesn't need to be from someone famous. The only thing that needs to happen is that it impressed you or you liked it. So, and you need to analyze that speech from the viewpoint of your project. So if your project is about speech structure, for example, you need to analyze that speech from the point of view of speech structure. What is the beginning? What is the opening? Until what point is the opening? What is the conclusion? What are the individual sections in the speech? How are the transitions between those sections? And then you present that analysis to the club so that the club can learn as well from your analysis. And after you've done the analysis, you do the speech practice yourself so that you actually have to deliver a speech that has a good structure, good opening, good conclusion, etc., etc. In this way, we try to run away from developing, let's say, what you would call the Agora way of speaking. We don't want an Agora way of speaking to exist. We want every one of you to develop their own natural style. So speech analysis, projects, They act as a learning tool for you to be exposed to other speaking styles, to a large variety of speaking styles, and also as a learning tool for applying the principles of the different techniques in public speaking, like having a structure, having a message, using vocabulary, and so on and so forth. Now, once you're finished with the basic educational path, there are some advanced educational paths, each of them in turn divided into projects between 7 and 12, each of them. Not all of them are ready. Some of them are ready right now, and we'll be publishing them shortly as soon as we close the wiki. But that comes after the basic educational path. You first have to complete all the 16 projects of the basic path before continuing. Now, where to find all the things? Because usually when people start, apparently the most difficult thing, despite the fact that everything we have is open, and right now it doesn't really require registration anywhere, but that seems to be difficult. And I understand, because Agora has grown so much in terms of documentation that sometimes it's difficult to find things. So let me share another screen right now. Where is it? Give me a second to find it. Okay. All our documentation right now is on the wiki. Right now, you don't need any login user to access it. That will change in the future, though, I must warn you. So, in terms of meeting roles and meeting activities, everything is documented in this section. So, for example, if you have the timer of the upcoming meeting, then ideally you should come here. If you haven't been the timer before, you should come here and learn about what a timer does and how to do it. And there are a lot of tips, and there are a lot of ideas and a lot of suggestions on how to do properly timing, how to show things, how to show the signals, what the signals mean, and all that. So as you see, everything is clearly documented. Of course, after you've been a timer 3 or 4 times, it's enough. You don't need to be reading this every single time. We do update the documentation frequently, by the way, but still, I mean, some things are relatively stable. Same as the meeting leader. If you're the meeting leader and you don't know what a good meeting leader is, then, well, come here. It's very described, and we'll be soon adding videos and other tutorials about that. Well, for now, mostly it's everything is written. But you read it once and you're done. Now, in terms of the educational program, everything is documented here. I want to draw your attention to the speech analysis part that documents how to do speech analysis projects, because that is something that probably you haven't seen in other places if you come from existing organizations. That is unique to us. And it explains how to do that particular part of the project. And for the projects themselves, you have here the basic educational path. And you would go, I don't know, imagine that your project is project number 2, speaking about the things that you like. So you go here, you can see the learning objectives, you can see what's the timing that you have to do. You have to speak a minimum of 2 up to 4 minutes. And then, well, you read the stuff that you have to do. Not all projects are that long. And the evaluator will have something like this, which is the evaluation card. The design will change, but the questions will stay the same. But basically, for example, for the first project, well, you see that the goals are rather generic, like was it natural, anything that could be improved. Questions are a bit generic. But for other projects, as we begin, for example, getting into more advanced topics, like, for example, researching a topic, as you can see, things become a bit more complicated. You are well, for this one, surprisingly, you may use notes because it's research after all. So, but for others, for example, like using humor in speeches, notes cannot be used because you have to be able to speak without notes. You cannot be hiding behind the podium or lectern. You may use a presentation software, although it's not very recommended for humor, but it's okay. You may use a microphone if you want to. And again, the evaluation cards, well, here there are 2 because there's a speech analysis part and a project part. The evaluation cards are way more specific right now. Like, for example, is it humor? How did the audience react? Did they actually laugh? I mean, you can have a brilliant speech, but if the audience doesn't laugh, then the humor was not there, really. were you comfortable with the kind of humor used in the speech? Because some people like to use a kind of humor that alienates part of the audience. That's usually not good. So each project has their own evaluation cards. And one last thing that you should be aware of as well. Well, there's a lot of documentation on many other topics. This is the main index, so you can find almost everything from here. But in terms of actually getting templates and things like that, we have what we call here the branding portal, where you can get logos, fonts, you can get here in Club Business templates for evaluation forms, for agendas, for whatever you need. Timer templates, club certificates if you need to present to members. And well, you have everything here. You can adapt them. The only thing that you need to be aware is what we call the brand guidelines. And the brand guidelines basically specify how to use properly all the assets, how to use the logo, what things can, what things cannot be done. For example, like manipulating the logo and things like that. In any case, before starting to use the materials, please have a look at the guide so that everything is correctly done. Okay, so let's move on. Other things that we do are regional and international conventions. Every year, the convention is in a different place. Last year, the first international convention that the first international convention that we had was in Lisbon, in Portugal. Next one is going to be in Kathmandu, Nepal. And in 2021, we'll see. Every time it will be in a different continent, for sure. A bit like the Olympic model. And we have some international contests that go through different stages. And as you can see, we endorse a viewpoint on public speaking that has a purpose. I mean, as Kennedy used to say, the only purpose for giving a speech is changing the world. So that's what we try to encourage. People that speak for a goal, for a purpose, not in general. For sure, you can have entertainment speeches, and that's why we have the contest for best humorous speech. But as you can see, the others are a bit more directed, like best educational speech, best storytelling, best social awareness speech. And well, the best community project, that's a leadership contest already. It's not related so much to public speaking. Okay, and now the first meeting. What you do on the first meeting specifically? Well, our recommendation is just to have these 5 sections, nothing more. One prepared speech, one evaluator, 2 guys doing the analytical reports, that's a timer and a grammarian. Forget about, we have like body listening evaluator, body language evaluator, listening evaluator. You can forget about those for now. A thought of the day or idea of the day or movie of the day or whatever you like of the day is like a mini speech. And then a section for improvised speech, or hot questions as we call them. The important thing about hot questions is that they have to be realistic. We don't like hot questions or improvised speeches in which they devolve into, I don't know, something grotesque or humorous or completely absurd. Meaning that the goal of the improvised speeches part is training you for specific situations in life. For example, someone leading the improvised speeches section could say, imagine that you're at a job interview, that's pretty realistic, and the person asks you, what's your worst trait, or what's your worst attribute, or what are you bad at? That's also realistic. If instead he asks something like, okay, imagine you're a superhero, what's your favorite superpower? Well, that's not really very realistic. Probably no one is going to ask you that ever in professional life. Well, maybe if you're dating someone, could be. But those kinds of questions are more in the icebreaker section, which we also have. That section is just for getting to know each other. It's a bit more relaxed, a bit more humorous. But improvised speeches has to be realistic. It has to be something that can happen to you in your life. Now, with those sections, you have a meeting that is about 1 hour long. And but considering you have applauses and people going to the stage and walking back to their seats, it ends up adding to 1.5 hours. And you have a suggested agenda here. I will share the recording after the meeting, so you can pause it and look at it. And the slides have been shared many times before, so you can have them. And for this first meeting, you would only need 8 people, really. And that's the origin of our 8 members to start the club, really, requirement. Meaning that you need a meeting leader, a timer, a grammarian, someone to speak. Well, someone to deliver, everyone will speak, but someone to deliver a prepared project, someone to evaluate him, someone to lead the hot questions section, thought of the day, and meeting evaluator. Although ideally everyone should have a different role, sometimes if people especially don't show up, you will end up with people having more than one role. Well, that cannot be helped. The meeting leader should be able to improvise and assign that role to someone else, not just cancel the section. So for example, if the hot questions leader didn't show up, that doesn't mean, oh, we're not going to have hot questions. No, you have to improvise and, okay, Peter, can you do hot questions? Please improvise something. Well, that happens, unfortunately. And now one quick comment to mention that everything we've been talking about is assuming that your club is going to be what we call an open public club. An open public club is a club that doesn't have any restrictions on people that may join, except that there is availability in the venue of space in the venue where you're meeting. If there are 15 chairs, then it fits 15. That's it, or 16 maybe, tops. And you cannot accept more members for now until you change venue. That's fine. And clubs like those are completely free. You don't have to pay us anything for any reason. There are no chartering fees or membership fees, so you don't have to buy anything from us. Not only you can't buy even if you wanted to, because we don't have an online shop. It has never been a priority. But I do want to make you aware that not all the types of clubs that exist in Agora are free. If a club wants to restrict attendance, so for example, only my employees can be members of my club, or only people belonging to that particular professional association may be members of that club, those clubs do have to pay fees to us, because they are using everything that we have developed, but they are not giving back to the community. They are keeping it to themselves, so they do have fees. We also have a youth program that is being developed right now under the leadership of Fred from Canada. And we consider that program mainly targeting kids that are in early school or preschool years, 14 and below. For children that are 15 and above, we consider them perfectly capable of following the adult educational program. And in fact, there are clubs that allow them to be there without any problem. With or without their parents, that's a bit up to the club and the legislation of the country. We don't go there. That is going to be a club decision in any case, meaning you have to decide it. Now, what to do now? Well, the recipe for success is actually starting. Starting is like 60% of the whole effort. And experience shows that it's much better to start, to make mistakes, because it's not going to be perfect from the very beginning. You will make mistakes, you will face problems, and learn from those mistakes and improve. It's much better to do that way. Again, it's the cycle that I mentioned before. It's much better this approach than trying to come up with the perfect meeting, with the perfect agenda, with the perfect venue, with the perfect members, with the perfect moment. That's never going to come. And I always use a couple of examples. A club that, for example, when they submitted their registration, their meeting was in 3 months' time. And that's not really a scheduled meeting. That's like, I have an idea to meet, but I'm not sure really. If your next action is more than 2 weeks ahead, you don't really have a plan. You just have a dream. And they told me, well, but there are going to be elections in our country. And the problem is that if you want an excuse, you always have an excuse. If there are no elections, it's going to be a soccer match. If it's not a soccer match, it's going to be the end of the school year, or the start of the school year, or the weather, or something else. There is always a reason for not having a meeting if you look hard enough for it. So in effect, those are excuses, really. And I'll use the opposite example. Emmanuel Antwi in Ghana, he he started his first club about 2 months ago. He was expecting an attendance of 10, 12 people, but only 4 showed up because of the rain. There was a strong rain that day. But he persevered, he persisted. He met weekly, and not only his club is rather healthy now, but there are 7 more clubs in Ghana, all sponsored by him. So the whole thing is actually starting, I would say. If you start, you will grow. If you don't start, then you won't exist. That's a bit up to you. One thing I must insist, especially, and I think I mentioned that in the group, since we are not here to sell anything, at the end of the day, it's up to you if you want to start a club or not. We don't gain anything in particular from a club existing in Kuwait or not. Well, it's nice to have one and to be able to add that country and your club to our community. But all the benefits of having a club are for you. So we won't be pushing you to start a club. At the end of the day, you have to have your own interest in doing that. Now, about the specific procedure, I would say with this training and reading the roles that I mentioned before in the educational materials, that's more than enough. There are some recordings that you can watch. Well, people publish all the time in the international group recordings of videos, but that's really the only knowledge you need at this point. Agora is much bigger than what I've shown you, but the whole point and the whole fun of it is being able to discover it bit by bit once you have some basics in motion already. Now, we provide you by default with a club name and a club logo. In this case, Agora Speakers Kuwait. But once you have established the club, once it's stable, you can change it once you have developed your own identity to something else. Although usually people stick with the city name because it's a bit representative and it shows that they were the first club in that city or in that country in this case. So that's a bit up to you once you have established. One thing that you do need to decide, though, is whether your club is going to have fees or not. Although we as a foundation are free for open and public clubs, clubs may have expenses, obviously, like if you go to a venue that has a cost, if you can't find a free venue, then obviously someone will have to pay that cost. Or if you're photocopying materials or printing them or whatever, obviously this has a cost that has to be shared by all members. So it's up to you to decide whether you want to have fees or not, and what periodicity, whether it's, I don't know, $1 per meeting or $5 per meeting, or $1 million every month if you can find someone to pay you that amount. That's a bit up to you. But if you have fees, then there are several rules that have to be obeyed. You can read about them in the documentation that are mostly concerned with transparency, to make sure that the funds are properly used, that they are not used for profiting someone or his company, for example. You have to decide also the meeting frequency. We usually recommend that you should be meeting at least once a month, because less, it's not really a club. The continuity, being able to meet periodically is lost if you meet less frequently than a month. We do recommend that clubs meet weekly, though. This makes the beginnings of the club much more, well, not much more difficult, because it's difficult for everyone to be attending every single week. So there will be some sessions in which only 5 or 7 people will show up, and they will be difficult. But the club will grow much faster and will become much stronger in the long term. Because if I'm a person that wants to visit a club and possibly join, if the club is meeting like something like first and third Thursday of every month, I have to be thinking about, okay, what Thursday is today? Is it the first? Is it the third? Okay, the first Thursday of this month was the holiday and there was a meeting. Does it mean that that it moves to the second, or there was not? And the moment you start asking people to be thinking about those things, they give up and they say, okay, well, I'm not going to go. So you lose a lot of potential members actually that way, a lot of potential guests. So that's our recommendation, but that's a bit again up to you. Now, you would need a minimum of 8 people, but they would need to be very committed. Like, you need to make sure that they show up at meetings, or to be on the safe side, 10, 12. In the Kuwait group, there are like 25. I do hope that there is enough people to create a club. Otherwise, it would be a disaster. And you need to have an initial set of officers. There are more officers that need to be filled in, but at least for starters, at least those 3 officers, so that there is no single person that is bearing the whole effort of the club, because that burns people rather quickly. The effort has to be spread, and the success of a club is a collaborative effort. So no one should expect someone else to do things for you. I mean, everything is free, but at the end of the day, learning takes time and commitment. And if you're not willing to do that, then Agon is not for you, for sure. And one last thing that you need to decide is a venue, of course. Usually, it works asking out for help, other members, especially if they have companies where they can ask for a meeting place. A public club can meet at a company on company premises. That's not considered a corporate club as long as everyone can attend. It doesn't matter really where the club meets. Another thing that usually works is asking or trying to come to agreements with schools, universities, libraries, because it's a win-win thing, really. For the club, it's a win because you get a free room, and for the university, it's a win because you can offer them an activity that doesn't cost them anything. Not only it doesn't cost them anything in terms of money, but it doesn't cost them anything in terms of effort. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to organize anything. They don't have to learn anything. And they can offer that activity to their students, like an additional service of this university. That's fine. Since it's free, well, this is a plus that we have. So usually, in the kinds of skills that we're teaching are skills that they have a lot of demand. And if people had to go to classes and seminars and workshops or other organizations, as I mentioned, you would have to pay, and sometimes quite a lot. So it's usually a good selling point to offer that to universities and schools. If that fails, then you can try pubs, cafes, restaurants, or places where the owner maybe will be able to give you a free room or a free space for you in exchange for, I don't know, or each member ordering a drink or something like that. And if everything fails, well, you can use open spaces if the weather is good enough. Many clubs, especially, for example, in Spain, despite the fact that they do have a venue where they meet, they routinely do open air sessions in public theaters, in parks, where it pushes members out of their comfort zone. And usually people that are passing by, they become curious, they stop, they start asking questions, they are thrilled, and many of them actually end up joining the club. And last thing, the registration itself. The registration is super easy. You need to have the first meeting scheduled already. Like, we are going to meet in 2 weeks, and this is the agenda that we're going to have. We need at least 1 week in advance because we like to create an announcement to promote it a bit. You need to fill a registration form that basically contains the minimum information of the club. That's online. And after you do that, we create one of these announcements that we're constantly making about the appearance of a new club. Sometimes we promote the event we do a marketing campaign that we pay to increase a bit the attendance. And hopefully, when you hold the meeting and you share the pictures of your success, don't be shy of sharing them, even if the attendance didn't turn out as you expected. You're expecting 20 people, only 5 showed up. That's fine. You started. You will grow. Don't worry. The important thing is not giving up. As I said, every single club that has started has grown. There have been no exceptions so far. But of course, those that didn't start, they don't exist. So to conclude, what would be the next steps for you? And that's for you already. I cannot push you more than I've already pushed. First, you need to decide on a venue, a day and a time where to have the first meeting, schedule it, register, and then meet. It's usually much simpler when done than with all these explanations. As I said, well, it sounds like a promotion, advertisement for Nike, but at the end of the day, it's just do it. And from our experience, if you take more than 3 weeks in doing all these 4 steps, then the probabilities of actually starting a club decrease drastically, because it becomes very diffuse, very everything in the future, and you don't have more than time enough to start a club before New Year. So this is everything that I had to share with you. Now, if you want to ask like any general questions or specific questions, I'm available.
So, Alex, I have one here.
Yep.
Agora is a non-profit organization, right?
That is correct.
So I don't know. I want to know what is the motive, what is the benefit for Agora to be there.
There is no particular benefit if you're looking for something special. I mean, it's just we have this idealistic view that if we train, that if you reach out to many people and train them to be leaders, and in the process of training those leaders, they do good projects for their environment, then the impact is going to be huge. But other than this kind of like educational vision and social improvement vision, there are no other goals really.
Okay, thank you. And what about you told that the restricted and corporate clubs, there is a fee. So this fee is spent on the clubs itself, or?
No, in those cases, the fee is paid to Agora Speakers International. Apart, they can have their own club fee. And that is part of our economic model, in fact, because Agora does cost to sustain. So we rely on donations, we rely on state grants, and we rely on corporate and restricted clubs, let's say, paying the costs of Agora for everyone else. It's a bit like it's a bit like
yes,
a bit like software projects like MySQL or Red Hat or Wikipedia, in which you have Google paying a lot of money to Mozilla and Wikipedia, and then you have people that use, I don't know, MySQL commercially, and they pay a commercial license.
Yeah, very clear. Thank you.
More questions? Be brave.
So, Alex, one question.
Sure.
So now, if we want to start a club, okay, I want to know who is much interested. I want to know from those ladies and gents attending the meeting, and as well the guys on the group. Okay, so from your experience, how to do that? I want to know who's interested so we can start one.
My experience would be take the lead. If you want to start a club, start asking and pushing people around, like I pushed you to have this meeting. And if you don't try to include everyone, because there are always going to be people that are passive, that are not interested, that are just there. And you need to start making decisions. I mean, if you see that there is disagreement that you can't reach an agreement on the best time and date, you have to decide on something. It's all about taking the lead.
Okay.
In fact, we didn't do that in Kuwait, but in other groups we have started removing people that don't answer in 1 week, because if someone doesn't have three minutes to fill like a survey telling when they are free for a free training that benefits them, then we don't want those people. We're not here to sell things. We don't want to have like 10 million uninterested members. We'd rather have 100,000 very interested members.
Agree.
So I would advise, the advice I would give you is the same, meaning you should, if you want to take the lead, you should develop a feeling on who's really interested and who's just there passing by, and just take into consideration those that are really interested. The others, well, if they want to join after the fact, then fine. If not, forget about them.
Okay, and as well, can I post like something on my LinkedIn profile or Facebook?
Sure.
So encourage more strangers to
yeah,
join
of
the
course.
club.
I mean, share, publish publications, post on the international group as well that you're starting the club in Kuwait or whatever. Well, one thing that I forgot to mention, especially if you're interacting with institutions, with universities and things like that, is that if you need it, we can provide official support letters, meaning we can send an email or to the, I don't know, to the dean or to the person you tell us, supporting and endorsing your club, saying, okay, we are, so they know that it's not only you, it's an international foundation, we are registered, we're worldwide, and we endorse your club, and we're non-profit, and all sorts of things. So if you need that kind of support letter in order to secure a venue, we can provide that.
Yes, I have one question. After this training and education from Agora, do you receive anything from?
What do you mean?
Like a certificate, anything, or support?
No, because nothing has happened yet.
Maybe after, yeah.
When you finish the educational path, it's a slide that I used to have, but since I try to keep the meeting shorter and shorter, although I don't really manage, after each educational path that you complete, and after some of the activities like leadership or debates, you do receive either a badge or a certificate, digital ones.
Wow, it's nice.
Yeah, they show on your user profile, and the badges in particular, they conform to the Open Badges standard, which is an international, well, it's an IT standard, and you can embed them in CVs, in LinkedIn profiles, and people can click on them, and then they are like images with an embedded QR code that can be used.
It's really nice to hear.
Yeah. But your real focus, that's why I removed that slide, because
yes.
you should be focused on learning and not so much on getting
yes, of course.
Although I understand that in some countries or some people like really to have that, and that's fine. Fine. You actually can choose like from 3 different models of certificates, whatever you like the most.
Well, but the main goal should be the learning process,
right? Learning. And we don't have, especially for people that come from other places, we don't have like a time limit or a rush to make you finish. Well, of course, you shouldn't be spending 2 years in finishing the basic path, but everyone proceeds at their own pace. And if they feel they need to repeat a project, we really encourage that, because if you rush through the program, the only person you're lying to is yourself.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So yeah.
So anyway, what do we need to start this group?
Well, these 4 things.
the venue, the day and time, yes.
Yeah, the first 2, because the third is super easy. There is an online form, you fill it in, and if everything is fine, you're registered the next day. Then you don't have to submit any papers or mail anything. We don't need a membership list. We need at least 8 members for sure, but if you have 20, you can submit only 8, and that's it. And the agenda for the next meeting, and that's it. Nothing more. As simple as it gets. And the agenda doesn't need like to be super precise. In fact, the only reason why we ask the agenda is because at the beginning in some countries, people were so enthusiastic about starting on Agora clubs that they registered meetings and they really didn't know what to do in those meetings. So we don't want that. We don't want to grow just for the sake of growing. It's not the goal. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's nice, and thank you very much for sharing.
Well, and thank you all for being here. And I hope that, soon I'll have news from you. I will be, I'm not leaving the Kuwait channel, although I'll be a lot less involved right now.
Yeah, one question. Will you be facilitating anything from our group here in Kuwait?
Well, I don't like to intervene too much, because after all, part of the leadership skill is organizing a club. So, a group of people do have to emerge that, let's say, push things to happen. Otherwise, I am being the leader, and that's not good, because clubs have to be led by local people. Yes. But I will be available. I mean, if you ask me for questions or advice, either in the group or by a private message, that's fine. I mean, I'll try to reply. Or you can post the questions to the international groups, and there you have a much more varied set of opinions, because there are many successful club leaders there.
Okay, it's a good suggestion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so thank you everyone, and hope you get moving.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay, sure, Alex. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.